I'd like to introduce you to our segment host, Nouman Ashraf. He's an associate professor in the teaching stream within the organizational behavior area of the Rotman School of Management. For the last decade and a half, he's held senior roles at the University of Toronto, including most recently as the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Rotman. Please help me welcome to the stage, Nouman.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be in conversation with you and our panelists. But as we get started, can I ask for those that are able to please stand? Don't knock over any glasses or cups or anything like that. And if you could stretch out a little bit between yourselves and the next person in front of you or to your side. Ready? Jazz hands, jazz hands, jazz hands. And together, please. I'd like you to pay attention to which thumb you have over which thumb. I always have my left thumb over my right thumb. Out again. Jazz hands, jazz hands, jazz hands. And together again. And this time, I would like for you to put your non-dominant thumb over your dominant thumb. How does that feel? Weird? Great, have a seat. I want to thank all of you for your engagement and involvement in what I think is the most important part of society, and that is inclusive leadership. But inclusive leadership begins with understanding that all of us have default settings, and default settings get us into trouble. It's like that thumb that we're used to, putting one over the other. To be inclusive is to be mindful. Mark Tewksbury spoke about the idea of self-awareness. To be inclusive is to remember the power that all of us bring into any interaction, any conversation. But most of us ask the question, how will I ever know if I, little old I, am being an inclusive leader? So 3 quick things, and then I'll introduce our panelists today. Thing number 1, leadership is in a crisis of credibility. As someone who teaches leadership, I don't have to spend a lot of time looking for case studies. All I have to do is to go to my web browser every morning. To rescue it from its crisis of credibility, we have to understand that leadership isn't linked to title or rank or position. Rather, leadership is about choices, the choices that we make every single day. Anyone who shows up in a way that affects the experiences of others is a leader. Can I pause for a second? Eva, Terry, and the entire team in Tennis Canada, thank you very much for your leadership today. I'm not done with point number 1 yet. Inclusive leadership is understanding that we show up in a way that we create a culture in which every story matters. Today, we'll have an opportunity to hear from 4 extraordinary leaders and their stories. Thing number 2 we can do to ensure that inclusive leadership takes root. Mark asked the question of Michael, what are some leadership attributes that are important today? I got some bad news for you. I don't do leadership attributes, but I do pay a lot of attention to leadership behaviors. To me, the most important leadership behavior for inclusive leadership today is behavioral empathy. Anyone know what empathy is? Shout it out. What's empathy? Sorry? Walking a mile in someone else's shoes. Thank you. But you know what you got to do first? You got to do this. You got to take your shoes off first. Because if I don't take my shoes off and I walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, tell me your name, please. Sarah's shoes or boots or pumps or whatever, I don't get the full experience of Sarah's life. So what are some shoes we have to take off as leaders? Our training, our past experiences, and our fear of discomfort. Thing number 3, to make inclusive leadership a reality. Start today. I really want to thank Tennis Canada for having a conversation about equity in sport and inviting people like myself, you can tell, who are not part of professional sports, right, into the conversation. Because I think inclusive leadership requires the work of all of us. So what I'd like to do is I would like to briefly introduce all of our speakers today. I want to begin by saying that these are speakers that are making time today to be part of our conversation. And so I am going to begin with Shelia Cote-Meek, who is a professor. Shelia is known to me. Shelia, can I ask you please join us here on stage? Come on up. Shelia is a scholar who brings to life our work on indigeneity, on culture, and on leadership. I can't think of someone better to throw this to than Shelia. Shelia, welcome back.
Thanks, Nouman. So, bonjour, kwei. Warm greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today on this panel for what I believe is an essential to our progress in society. My topic is around intersectionality and why it matters, and looking at ways to broaden our understanding of equity. My role on this panel is to set a context for understanding that and why it matters. So in the next 10 minutes, I will discuss intersectionality and how it broadens our perspective on equity, but also calls us to work towards building a more inclusive world for us all. And when I say broadening, I mean we need to think about equity across all sectors, and not just in sport, but also in other areas. So for example, education, business, and so forth, and in general society. But first, I just want to start with a personal story. Like many of you, I have multiple ways of describing and identifying who I am. But first and foremost, my identity is as an Anishinaabe Kwe, an Indigenous woman. But I'm also a gay Indigenous woman, a partner, a mother, a professor, an auntie, and a caretaker of my elderly father, as well as being a university professor. Just to name a few, but you get the picture, right? Each of these identities influence how others see me and interpret me in the world around me, but they also shape how I experience the world around me. For example, my experiences growing up as a mixed-race Indigenous girl presented a number of complexities, including various forms of racism and discrimination. So for example, despite doing extremely well in school, in my K-12 years, I was actually told a number of times that I wasn't university material. But hey, here I am teaching at the university. So despite the challenges and some of the experiences in my life that were quite traumatic, these have also had a huge influence on me, who I've become, and the work I do in post-secondary education, where I vowed to break down barriers for those who were marginalized in society, including Indigenous, Black, racialized students, as well as students living with a disability. My work in post-secondary education has also taught me that we cannot separate the multiple identities that we hold, and we need to consider how racism and discrimination interconnect and overlap in the way that they operate. So I ask you just to take one moment and think about your own identities, and think about your age, your race, your ethnicity, your nationality, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, any sport identity that you hold, ability, class, etc. Think about those experiences and how they've shaped who you've become. Think about those experiences and how people react to you or respond to you as a person. So what exactly is intersectionality? So intersectionality was a term that was coined by a woman by the name of Kimberly Crenshaw, and recognizes how various social identities, such as race, gender, class, sexuality, disability, and others intersect and overlap and shape our individual experiences as well as the opportunities. She challenged us to see that our identities are multifaceted, connected, and they cannot be isolated from one another. Intersectionality matters because often what happens in our commitments to equity and justice is that we tend to focus on one aspect of a person's identity, for example, gender, which is often equated with only men and women, leaving out transgendered and non-binary persons. This actually creates silos in our understanding. These silos not only limit our perspectives, but they also tend to lead us to overlook the unique challenges and experiences faced by individuals who belong to multiple marginalized groups. Think about how an Indigenous woman's experience might differ from that of a non-Indigenous woman. Intersectionality allows us to break down these silos and develop a more comprehensive approach to equity and social change. In the post-secondary education system, it is imperative that we make space for diverse and the multiplicity of peoples, experiences, as well as identities, if we are at all intent on addressing the inequities that exist in our society. We cannot simply stop at addressing gender inequities. It goes far deeper and far farther than that. Our understanding also must confront the concept of privilege. And to be really clear, privilege does not mean that you haven't faced hardships yourself. Rather, it means that certain aspects of your identity have not historically been targeted for discrimination. So while I have experienced a number of barriers and discriminatory behaviors in achieving my own education, as well as in my career into senior administration, I also need to acknowledge the privilege that I do hold in being a university professor. Acknowledging our privilege in society is actually really critical to fostering understanding, recognizing disparities, and working to remove barriers so that people can participate fully. Let's look at the real-world impact of intersectionality. Consider how an Indigenous woman might face unique challenges in the education system compared to her non-Indigenous counterparts, or even a racialized man. For example, in the higher education sector where I work, women's presence at senior and executive levels positions in academia is disproportionately low, with fewer than 30% in these positions. And when I look around the executive table in my previous role, there were no Black or other Indigenous women that were visible. Melinda Smith, in 2019 study on U15 presidents, found that the president's executive tables were largely made up of white persons, at a rate of 90%. And while the gender gap has been closing, so for example, 60% male and 40% female in senior leadership positions, an intersectionality analysis further shows that 40% of those women were primarily white, and visible minorities, Indigenous and Black women were not visible. So we still have a lot of work to do across all sectors of society. Indigenous women, and men are notable for their absence, and there was a persistent data gap on persons with disabilities. These findings point to the fact that a number of other studies do, which is that leadership teams do not yet reflect the diversity that exists in the Canadian population. So intersectionality helps us understand these nuances and the interplay between racism and sexism, as well as a number of other isms, And that enables us to address the deeper systemic issues that exist in broader society. Of course, intersectionality is not without its challenges. Many people resist the concept because it is complicated and it complicates conversations about equity. We are naturally really attracted to neat, tiny parameters around identities. So we like to focus on gender, male and female. We don't want to kind of quote unquote muddy the waters with adding any other gender identities within that pool, because it makes it messy and it makes it difficult for us to understand how we're going to address those issues. But it doesn't mean that we should stop there. Now, I would like you to think about how we can apply intersectionality in our daily lives and in the work towards creating a better, more equitable society. And here are a few actionable steps to take. So 1, take the time to listen and learn courageously. I heard that word used, I think, on the first panel today. Be courageous. Step outside your comfort zones. I found that educating ourselves about the multiple and different identities and experiences so important to my own learning about diverse perspectives. So for example, while I am an Indigenous woman, I do not profess to understand all Indigenous peoples in Canada. In fact, did you know that in Canada that there are more than 630 diverse First Nations communities, which represent more than 50 different nations and have over 50 different Indigenous languages? Think about that for a moment. Second point, create space and amplify voices. Create opportunities for others who have been marginalized in society. Create space for their stories and experiences to be heard and to be acknowledged. Sit at tables and look around at who's represented, but also look at who's not there. The third point, work in collaboration and be an ally. Partner with diverse individuals from diverse backgrounds and be intentional about it. And be intentional about that, but also about your learning in order to foster inclusive societies. And 4, and I find this really one of the most important pieces, is to challenge stereotypes, racism, and discrimination. So when you see it happening, you hear it happening, stand up and speak out, because if you don't, then you're implicated in perpetuating ongoing discrimination and ongoing racism. It means that, again, that you have to be courageous and step out of your comfort zone. And finally, be an advocate for change. Support policies and practices that address intersecting challenges faced by marginalized communities, and ask questions. So in closing, intersectionality matters because it enables us to see the world through a wider lens, one that is more inclusive, compassionate, and informed. By embracing the notion that intersectionality matters, we can deepen and broaden our understanding of equity and are more likely to work together as a society where everyone feels valued and respected across all sectors, including sport, including business, including education, for example. So let us all work together, making intersectionality a cornerstone of our approach to thinking and working through equity and social justice. Miigwech, merci, and thank you.
I want to share with you the experiences of a couple of icons in their fields. W.E.B. Du Bois was the first African American to receive his PhD from Harvard University, the first African American, in fact, to be professor at Harvard University. To this day, the Center for African American and African Studies at Harvard is named the W.E.B. Du Bois Center. When asked about his experience at his alma mater, Harvard University, he said the following: I was in Harvard, but not of it. What do you hear in that? I was in Harvard, but not of it. That's the difference between what I call diversity by default and inclusion by design. Inclusive leadership isn't simply building for It's designing with the intersectional lens that Shelia has invited us to consider, to understand the broader range of human experiences that make all of us who we are, is an invitation to be inclusive. The second quote comes from Billie Jean King, who was here last year. And she said, pressure is privilege. The pressure that each of us feels based on the privileges that we enjoy is a reminder that we must do more. To speak more about our role in society, to embrace our story, I have the privilege of inviting to the stage Henoc Muamba, who is our own Toronto Argonaut, who, as he'll tell you very quickly and show you, I had the privilege of trying it on, his own Grey Cup ring. He's joined here today by his U of T alumna wife, Jessica. Good to have you here, and his daughter. So without further ado, Henoc, please come and join us here. Thank you.
Ooh, there's a lot of people here. I'm extremely privileged to be even in the presence of so many great individuals. I'm actually in heaven. So Nouman asked me earlier, he said, Henoc, tell me something that people wouldn't know about you, that wouldn't be able to Google. And I forgot to tell you, Nouman, we actually got married in this same venue 6 years ago. To Jessica. Jessica, give me a wave so everybody knows you're taken. So my beautiful wife and I got married 6 years ago, and this very room, which is nostalgic. Remember everything in here. But let me get to it. My wife usually tells me I talk a lot, but I think I'm just long-winded. So I'll try to keep it succinct so I can be to the point. And so, like I said, I'm humbled to be even here, to have been asked by the team, Terry and the whole team, Tennis Canada team, to even stand here and be able to share my story. I mean, I came here really wanting to share my story, wanting to share my journey, because I know how much power is in people's journeys. And I'll tell you what, guys, like, I'm absolutely full from everything that I've already received. Right? A lot of times people always say, like, it's better to give than to receive. It is so true. And when you try and give, that's when you receive the most. And so I hope that my journey, my story may also be of value to you as you continue on, even in the topic of inclusive leadership. And so I heard somebody say, man, that's a big ring. Yeah, it is pretty big, huh? It's a pretty big ring. So I've been playing professional football for 12 years. 12 years. 12 years. Now, it might not sound like something crazy, but the reality is, let's do this. I'm going to ask a question. Making eye contact, so I might have to ask you. He's like, dang. But what's the average length of a professional football player? In your opinion, just guess, quick guess. I got time clicking. 10, that's way too much. I got 12, but that's way too much. Somebody else, put your hand up. You're looking at me. Oh, I see right there. 4, still too much. Anybody else? Last guess. Come on. 2. No, it's actually 3. The average length of a professional football career is 3 years. 3 years. And I'm at 12. So it's something that I'm absolutely excited about, but also I cherish very dearly. And over the course of my career, I've learned so many things that I hope to be able to share with you guys, and I hope that you guys can find value in it as well. 12 years. 12 years, but every time I talk about this, every time I talk about the length of my career, I talk about my journey, I'm always forced to go back to the beginning. To the beginning. How many of us here have people or parents that were born outside of Canada? Yes. How many people were born outside of Canada? Okay, I see a bunch of hands up as well. See, I was born in Africa, in the heart of Africa, in the Congo. And if you know anything about Africa, you know that when you say football, you're really talking about soccer. And so I had no understanding, no knowledge of the game of football. And it was only because of the boldness of my parent who chose to leave the Congo in hopes of a better future for their kids. I have 2 brothers. I'm the second of 3 boys. And we moved to Canada. We lived in Montreal for a few years, and I fell in love with multiple sports. I mean, basketball, hockey, track, you name it. I played all kinds of sports, except for football. I grew up in Mississauga, and it wasn't until grade 10 that some people that were in my circle, people that were in my circle, started telling me, hey, Henoc, you should try the game of football. I absolutely did not like football. I didn't know too much about it, but I didn't like it. But the reason why, because I'm sure some of you guys are like, 12 years, this guy's crazy. Yes, I think you have to be a little bit crazy to play football for as long as I have at least. But it's so physical, and that was one of the things that I didn't want to be a part of. And so I was so afraid, I took a leap of faith. I'm gonna be really quickly. This is exactly how it went. I remember my coach came, he said, okay, Henoc, you're gonna try football, right? I said, yes, okay. He said, you're gonna be a running back. You don't have to know much about the game. I'm just gonna talk about it. He said, you're gonna be a running back. I said, okay, cool. He said, okay, so you're gonna stand here. When the guy in front of you, his name is a quarterback, he's gonna hand you the ball, this weird shaped looking ball. You're gonna run all the way over there. See that big thick white line? I said, yes. He said, okay, once you cross that, it's a good thing for us. I said, okay, simple enough, easy, right? But he forgot to tell me there'll be 12 people angry for no apparent reason that will want to come and break every single bone in my body. Like every single bone. And they would run. Here's the crazy thing, guys. Here's the crazy thing. I got the ball. I remember like it was yesterday. I started to run in absolute fear. In absolute fear. And the truth is, my first success that I experienced in football was me running in fear. Here's the lesson. I don't know where you find yourself today. I don't know how experienced you might be. I don't know what your goals are. I don't know what you want to accomplish. You might feel maybe not qualified enough, not able to do it. You don't have enough time. You might be scared, but keep going. Keep running. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl, but by any means, keep moving. Because the truth is, the opposite of success, the opposite of greatness is not failure. The opposite of success is actually complacency, lack of movement, lack of growth. And I learned that very early on in my career. But it was only because I was able to surround myself with the right people. I created the right community around me to instill in me the confidence and the courage to take a leap of faith. The same leap of faith that my parents took when they decided to start over with their kids. And I took that. And I would always remember that as I continued to grow and grow in my career and grow in my profession. Let's see, I played in multiple cities. I mean, Winnipeg, Indianapolis, Saskatchewan, Montreal, Dallas, and now I'm home in Toronto. And we won a Grey Cup ring, a championship ring. Yeah, thank you. And it's amazing. But over the course of my career, guys, one of the things that I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's not about the ring. It's not about the MVP trophy that they gave me. It's not about the championship trophy. It's not about any type of status or any type of trophy that they might hand you. The truth is, it's really about the impact that you can have on the people that are around you. And that's how I've chosen to live my life. That's how I've chosen to grow in my career. Because I know that I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the people that were around me. I'll leave you with 3 points that have absolutely changed my life and allowed me to even stand here in front of you guys. The most important thing, whether you're a newcomer to the country or a newcomer or someone new in a new environment, create your community. Because it is your community that allows you to have that confidence that I talked about, that courage that I talked about, so that you can leap and soar to new heights. The next thing is simple. Take that leap. Take that leap, because guess what? Growth, success, greatness, and comfort cannot coexist. And so take that leap. Utilize the community around you. Utilize that community. And the last thing that I love to talk about is the fact that A lot of times people want to get into new communities, but to forget the fact that your true power is in your identity, is in who you are, in your uniqueness. And so don't lose yourself, but grow in that community. I don't have that much time anymore left, but I'm so humbled to be here, and I talk about it. You might think I'm just up here saying some stuff, but I'm standing here as a husband to my beautiful wife, Jessica, but a father of 3 girls. Thea, who's actually here in attendance. Are you here, Thea? She's right there waving at me. Ada and Briella, beautiful girls. And I'm so encouraged when I stand here today, listening to the various speakers that came up, listening to the executive at Tennis Canada, and the goals in the future that are to come in the future. I'm absolutely enthusiastic about what's coming because I know that my daughters and girls that look like my daughters and that aspire to be great are in great hands. So thank you, Tennis Canada. And more than anything, I also want to say thank you to everyone that's standing here today, sitting here today, because truly, you are all champions. And being a champion is not just about the ring, it's not just about the trophy or something that's handed to you. It's about a decision that you make. And it's about the actions that you continuously, repeatedly do. And so I'm gonna do one thing before I get off. I'm gonna say one thing, and I need your cooperation. I'm gonna say we are, you say champions. We are. But I need you guys to say it like you really mean it. We are. We are. Thank you.
In honor of Henoc, I want to share with you a story that comes to us from East Africa. The story of a lion cub who comes to his mama, the lioness. He says, "Mama, are you not the queen of the jungle?" She said, "Of course. What sort of question is that? I'm the queen of the jungle." So then why is it that in every story that I read, it ends up with a hunter killing the lion? Mama pauses and says, "Son, every story will have precisely such an ending until such time as when lions learn how to write." The question of how do we imagine an inclusive society, inclusive culture, inclusive team has everything to do with the narrative that we inherit, that we share, and that we actually perpetuate. To give us a broader lens on this, we have the privilege of hearing from Rabia Khedr, who has been an incredible activist, leader, and champion around disability, around race, around faith, and around community. Rabia, I have known personally for over 2 decades, is an inspiration to me and to others, who reminds us that if we are serious about inclusion, about equity, we can't do that without understanding that human rights, society, and our actions make a difference. Rabia, please come and join us here on stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? Should I parlez-vous another language? Like, shall I flip into Tori Tori Punjabi, ya Tori Tori Urdu, or, Shwaya Shwaya Arabi, something? Anybody speak any of those languages out there? There are many languages that I could accommodate people in, but I need you to accommodate me, and some of you have tuned into that by giving me verbal cues. So an aspect of accessibility is accommodation. So just for your information, I'm hiding a little earphone because I don't like wireless stuff. I'm pretending to look at my screen, but I have my notes on here that I'm listening to. Now, correction, I've known Nouman Ashraf for more than 3 decades, and he's the guy who I go telling behind his back, every decade or so we meet somewhere at some event, but I attribute some of my community activism to because he suckered me into running the Muslim Students Association at U of T from behind. I believed in leadership from behind back then. And then I decided that, you know what? If I really want to get the job done, I have to stand up front. So Thank God I grew up in Canada because Canada is the best and I have the right to voice for more and make it even better. I am Rabia Khedr. I'm a hyphen with many hijabs. I am a Muslim, Punjabi, Pakistani, Canadian woman, wife, mother, activist, advocate, daughter of aging parents, sister to siblings with disabilities, mother of 4 adults, and I happen to have a disability. I'm blind. This is intersectionality. Some aspects of who I am are visible, and some are not. So you see my race. You see my faith because I choose to visibly express it. I identify as a female. You know my gender. As racialized women, add the faith and disability aspect to that, I am quadruply disadvantaged in our privileged society. And it is indeed a privilege to be at such an event. Doors traditionally have not been open to us in these spaces due to racism, classism, sexism, ableism, so on and so forth. And some of that is changing, and it does take champions. I know that there are many champions in this space who have been talking to all of this today. So I said, thank God I grew up in Canada because it's the best and I have the right to voice for more and make it even better. But it wasn't always better for me. As a child with a disability going through the school system of immigrant parents, as an immigrant child, my parents didn't know the system. They didn't know how to advocate for me. I had to learn to advocate. I was excluded in a majority neighborhood where I was the visible minority, and on top of that, we were a bunch of kids with disabilities in the family. We were labeled in all kinds of ways. I wasn't picked to play, street soccer with my neighbors. I was always sidelined. In school, in gym class, I was often excluded. I was the last to be assigned a team because nobody wanted me on the baseball team or, whatever other sports we played back then. I came last in cross country, and boy, were the teachers excited because I finished the race. I had some usable vision, so I faked my way through life a lot. To me, every obstacle I have learned over time is an opportunity. Through the experiences of exclusion that I had, I chose to dedicate my life, taking my lived experience to ensure accessibility, equity, justice, and inclusion for all, including my children. So as a mother who's blind, I didn't want my kids to be left out of things because people would assume it was because of my disability. When I was in school, I didn't take part in swimming because to me, wearing a bathing suit was culturally and spiritually not comfortable. I didn't know how to go home and tell my parents I need a bathing suit. They would be like, oh, Besharam, like shame on you, that kind of thing. Cultural context. So I ended up not knowing how to communicate that to my school. I also found the swimming environment, the pool, very dark and dingy. It was very difficult for me to see. The teachers and administration assumed that my family was too poor to afford a bathing suit for me. So I was sidelined. I was sidelined on many, many occasions when it came to sports and recreation and other such creative academic experiences. But somehow I turned out to be a cocky adult as a result of all those experiences and learned to voice for myself and others. So when my kids were old enough to start participating in sport, I sought out opportunities. There was a Muslim women's swim program that I got involved with another friend of mine who had a disability. And we improved that program. We started to run that program with the city of Mississauga, advocating for appropriate access to change rooms and a little more privacy and dignity. And fun story, how equity and accessibility works. So we used to cover up the windows, and eventually they installed drapes. And one day I was sitting there and a group came in and I said, "Oh, sorry, we have a private booking. You can't access the pool right now." And this gentleman said to me, "Oh, we're a private booking too." I said, "Oh, birthday party?" He goes, "No, we are naturalists, the roaming bears." I said, "Hey, whatever works for you." He said, "You know, you guys don't want people looking in. People don't want to look in at us." So that is equity, accessibility, and inclusion. We benefited from the blinds being up, and everybody else benefited from the roaming bears being in there, bare, with the blinds being up. So accessibility and equity, justice, inclusion, all of this takes creativity. The adults in my life were not creative. Teachers, principal, administration, throughout various opportunities, I was excluded in different ways. My children swam because I made sure there was a program that they could. Eventually, the city added a program to their regular recreation schedule that has a women-only component. Our girls went as far as some of the lifeguarding courses because Ontario's Swim for Life added and lifeguarding program, I can't remember the association now, sorry guys, made a pilot project where we trained lifeguards, in fact, who often don't have those opportunities. Yes, money plays a big role in professionally developing your sporting skills. Classism and ableism is across the board. It's not just about how to win the sport or win the game. It is in fact about how you play the sport. A little bit of creativity goes a long way to providing accessibility for everybody. Today, we run an Access Kicks program alongside a House League soccer program to ensure that folks with intellectual disabilities get to wear a team jersey, get to kick around a ball in modified sport to score, to kick, to play. They don't have to be in a proper organized team. They have fun. Fun is an integral part of sport and well-being. They feel confident. I talked about my girls. My girls chose to wear hijab, which I did much later in life, and that's my ding-a-ling. Much later in life, and they ended up playing varsity sport. Uniforms, they found ways to modify them for themselves. They wore their soccer uniforms with a long sleeve and leggings underneath. And they played, and they were proud of playing. Confidence, self-esteem, mental and physical well-being matter to everybody. It matters to people with disabilities. A champion is someone who continues to play the game until they get it right, as Billie Jean King said. And we're all obligated to do our part to change the system. We have to voice, and we have to voice for more to make our society better. What's in our culture that's a barrier to participation? Does hijab, how we dress, what we wear, how we handle a ball really make that much of a difference? As long as we play by the rules of the game, let's address some of the barriers that build into the culture of the rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabia, for that deeply personal narrative, but a universal call to action. So I have a guess. My guess is the following: that some of us, if not many of us, may be finding ourselves going down a downward spiral of guilt and shame. And if that's you, I want you to stop. Because I don't believe that guilt and shame are meaningful drivers of leadership behaviors, of inclusive leadership behaviors. Instead, we have a choice. The choice that I want to end off on in my call to action with you is commitment and love. If you're going, WTF, what the falafel? Why is a business school prof dropping the L word? It's not even leadership. Well, James Baldwin once said that love allows us to take off the mask that we feel we cannot live without, but we know we cannot live within. One more time. Love allows us to take off the mask that we feel we cannot live without. All of us in this room, myself included, feel an enormous amount of pressure every single day to perform the role of an inclusive leader. And that is just BS. And of course, by that, I mean bold statement. Performative leadership gets us nowhere. Inclusive leadership is one that says performance is not enough. Instead, we must lean into love. Loving for others what we haven't experienced for ourselves. And that's what makes us great. I'm going to close off with an experience that informs my role as an educator. This happened about 7 years ago. So it was just about maybe 3 weeks later. It's the first week of September, right? Our classes started at the Rotman School. And shout out to our Rotman alumni that are in the room, right? And I have this habit. So I had my first caffeine shot at 5 o'clock in the morning. So by 9:30, I'm ready for my next drip, you know? So I go downstairs with 2 mugs, not just one. I look for someone I haven't met in the hallways. And this early September morning, I find someone, a young person, sitting by themselves. And guess what? They're not even looking at their phone. I'm like, wow, nirvana. So I go up to them and say, hey, what are you drinking these days? And they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, sorry, who are you? Like, my name is Nouman, I'm a professor. I'm gonna get my latte at the second cup. What's your beverage of choice? And they say, green tea. I'm like, dude, it's not like valet, it's self-serve. Come with me, we'll go to the south end of the building. I get my latte with honey, he gets his green tea. While we're waiting for our order, I say to him, so how do you like our program? He says, it sucks. That conversation got really awkward really quickly. As I'm walking back to the elevator, so I ask him, so like, what's up with our program? He said, I don't want to talk about it. Okay. Go back to my office on the 6th floor, leave my door a little bit open. 10 minutes later, knock on the door. There's a person with a mug. He goes, here's your mug. I washed it. He says, great, thank you. He said, I want to tell you what sucks about this program. I said, sure. He said, may I come in? I said, sure. I close the door. I said, sure. May I have a seat? Sure. He said, you can tell I'm black. I said, I can. He said, I'm from the States. I didn't know that. He said, I'm also gay, but I haven't come out to my team members with whom I spend upward of 8 to 10 hours a day at Rotman, and I don't feel that I can. That's why your program sucks. I said, okay. As he's getting up to leave, I say to him, are you going to do something about it? He said, what should I do? I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't do that anymore. I got teenagers. I've learned my lesson. I said, is there someone in the program, in your team that you could talk to? He goes, yes, there's this person. Her name is Bryn. So we do a little role play. I play him, he plays Bryn, he plays himself, I play Bryn. Day 2, I go downstairs, Buddy is looking for me, right? I come out of the elevator, he yells at me, he goes, it's not a thing. I'm like, what? He goes, it's not a thing. So what are you talking about? He said, I told him, yeah, we do. What do you want us to do, throw you a party? Time out. Why was this student, a grad student, in an elite program, worried about sharing his full self with his team members? Because of what both Shelia and Rabia mentioned, past experiences, where they have been told they don't belong, they're not good enough, and so on and so forth. This student became a founder of one of our most successful clubs. It's called Letters. Get it? LGBTQ2S+, Letters. He was recognized as one of those leaders to watch out for in the future. And guess what? I was there at his graduation, commencement like this, give him a big bear hug. Then I leave for the month of July. I come back, there's a card under my door. I'm like, finally, my ship has come in. I opened the card expecting sequential, non-denominational bills. Anyways, it was a card, like not even a gift card, like a card. It's from him. It says, "Dear Professor Ashraf, today is my last day in Canada. I wanted to slip this card under your door when I knew you wouldn't be there. What I didn't tell you was that the day that you interrupted me in mid-thought, I was sitting by myself on the main floor of the Rotman School, was the day after my breakup with my long-term partner. In that moment in time, I was actively contemplating suicide. Whatever you choose to do, never stop having coffee with random strangers in your building." Inclusive leadership isn't about having this multi-year plan, a strategy. It begins with behavioral empathy, our commitment to understanding what the narratives, experiences, and obstacles that others face are day to day. I want to say to you, this matters even more in sport, because there was a time when athletes were spokespeople in and across their various dimensions, on the field and off the field. I think it's time for us to ask for that time back. It is important for you and I to recognize that all of us have privileges in the various domains in which we play. I use that term very, very deliberately. On the field, in our organizations, and across communities. I moved to Canada 33 years ago from the US. And if you were to ask me what is the best part about being a Canadian, the thing that makes me proudest of being Canadian is that we are a work in progress. It is our responsibility to keep on doing that in a way that we can do with inclusion, with equity, and justice. Thank you very much.
Hi, Unmatched. I'm Milos Raonic.
I'm Casper Ruud, and I'm all in for equity.
I'm Stefanos Tsitsipas, and I'm all in for equity.
Well, I think equity is important because giving the equal opportunity for both men and women are something that we need to kind of address.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for that. Obviously, I love women's sports. I mean, I think everyone can agree with me to this. I mean, putting in the same time, same efforts, and the purse should be the same for that.
2023, that's the year we live in, and I think tennis is maybe the sport that is the furthest on the subject. So I think tennis is doing a lot of good things, and I think other sports should maybe look up to tennis as a good role model.
I think 50 years at the Open we're celebrating, so that's super big, and I'm so close to so many great female athletes across the board, and I just love seeing what they're doing. Big fans, and I just want them to get the same that we get, and I think it's a pretty simple concept.